Hey guys, tonight we travel to a dusty Roman study where ink blots, scroll towers, and one surprisingly opinionated lizard coexist beneath the domed ceiling of Pliny the Elder's villa. The air smells like dried sage, overworked parchment, and something faintly lizardy. You're barefoot, stepping carefully between fallen quills and cracked amphorae, as a lazy green tail flicks across the mosaic floor like it owns the place, which it kind of does. The lizard's name has been lost to history. Some say Pliny never named it, believing it unwise to anthropomorphize reptiles. Others claim it bore a name too sacred or too absurd to repeat aloud, perhaps Marcus Slithers, perhaps Gaius Leaf Nibbler. You'll never know. What you do know, as you kneel beside the creature, is that it does not fear you. It blinks slowly, the way only creatures with nothing to prove can blink. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing this sleepy little community stretch across the world like the Roman roads themselves. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch beside the sun-dappled tiles, watching this lizard small, dull green, tail slightly chipped at the end. No one important would have noticed it, not even the house cat, which wisely kept its distance. But Pliny did. Pliny noticed everything. He noticed the angle at which the lizard warmed itself, the tiny scars near its claws, the odd way it tilted its head when someone mentioned a volcano. This lizard has already seen more than you'd guess. It's not a pet so much as a witness, a silent editor to over 37 volumes of natural history, a cohabitant of late-night scribbling sessions, and if you believe fringe scholars, a quiet influence on some very weird chapters about the mating rituals of eels. You rest your hand near it. Its skin is dry, but not brittle, like old olives forgotten behind a wine jar. It breathes, shallow but steady. Pliny. They say believed animals had souls, not in the poetic way, but in the data entry kind of way. If it moves, records can be kept. If it blinks twice after thunder, it's probably a form of lizard divination. The library smells faintly of burned myrrh and goose feather ink. Scrolls are stacked in half-failed pyramids. One leans dangerously against a bust of Cicero, who now appears to be rolling his marble eyes. You see a scribbled note pinned to a wax tablet. Observe lizard. Compare to Nile specimen. Avoid exaggeration. Classic Pliny. You follow the lizard's slow trek across the floor. It moves like it's got eternity to reach its next destination, which, right now, is the rim of an overturned drinking bowl. There's no urgency, but immense conviction. That's the thing with old Roman lizards. They had excellent work-life balance. Pliny's nephew, the future historian Pliny the Younger, once complained in a letter that the lizard had more access to the study than I do. He may have been joking, or not. Historians still argue whether the lizard ever left the house. Some say it followed Pliny even into the forum, tucked discreetly in his robes. Others insist it only stayed for the smell of fermented ink and papyrus glue. And at least one early Christian scholar claimed the lizard was a symbol, though, of what they never clarified. Divine wisdom. Excessive footnotes. Lizardness itself. Above you, the wind pushes faintly through an open archway, brushing past a dangling strip of drying lizard skin, shed like an old sentence, curled like a semicolon. The creature has molted at least 10 times on that same bookshelf, right between On the Nature of Stones and Recipes from the Provinces. Vol. 2. Not Gaul. You rest against the mosaic floor, trying not to shift too much. The tiles are cool, speckled with ancient food stains, and the occasional heel mark from a Roman sandal. You imagine what it's like to live this life slow, heat-seeking, surrounded by scrolls and obsessive humans. You're not hunted, not praised. You just are. And somehow, everyone remembers you. You rewind time. The scrolls are newer now, crisper, less stained. The floor tiles haven't cracked yet, and the bust of Cicero still has both ears. Somewhere in Hispania, under a scorched sun and the lazy flick of linen market tents, a younger Pliny, not yet the elder, squints at a basket of dried figs and accidentally spots a lizard clinging to the edge like it's auditioning for a life of scientific fame. The air smells like sun-warmed citrus and sweat-drenched soldiers. You're in the thick of a Roman outpost's open-air market, where everything is half barter, half theft, and entirely chaotic. Chickens argue with children, coins clink, and somewhere, a toothless woman yells about stolen garlic. The lizard is small, smaller than you'd expect, no more than the length of a scroll handle. But it's the color that stops Pliny, an uncanny green-gray, like storm clouds reflected in a bronze mirror. Its scales shimmer faintly, not glamorously, but like parchment catching firelight. And more than anything, it just stares at him. Historians still argue whether this was the exact lizard that would become his lifelong companion. Some say it was just the first of many, one of a rotating cast of reptiles he tried to befriend in his quest for natural knowledge. Others claim this moment marked a kind of cosmic adoption. The lizard chose him, not the other way around. Fringe scholars have even proposed that Pliny believed this lizard to be an omen. One obscure commentary from the 11th century reads, "He who sees the silent reptile at market shall gain the ear of emperors and the ash of gods." Very dramatic. Probably made up. Still, you can't help wondering if that little creature knew something no one else did. You follow Pliny back through the town, the lizard tucked into the fold of his sash like an odd coin purse with claws. Back then, he was stationed here with the Roman army, technically gathering administrative reports and practicing law. But Pliny didn't care for battlefield glory. His victories were footnoted. The lizard quickly adapts. It figures out the rhythm of Roman sandals on stone. It learns when to scamper beneath benches during court hearings and how to avoid the open flames in tavern kitchens. One bartender swears he saw it drink watered wine. Another claims it winked at him. You trail the pair through winding streets as Pliny jots observations onto wax tablets with his left hand, the lizard sunning itself on his right shoulder like a miniature dragon with no ambition. By the time they return to Rome, the lizard is less a pet and more a permanent accessory. It rides in satchels full of documents, curls up inside open volumes, and once, reportedly, fell asleep inside a boot meant for a visiting senator. The senator was not amused. Pliny, of course, wrote about it. Mainstream historians agree Pliny was fascinated by animals not as individuals but as patterns. His natural history contains absurdly detailed entries about weasels, camels, and even mythical creatures that likely never existed outside tavern stories. But the lizard never gets a full paragraph. Just footnotes, casual mentions, the way you might reference an elbow that always hurts when it rains, and yet it's everywhere. Quietly, tucked between lines, marginal sketches in some copies of his texts show a little reptile drawn beside weather reports or earthquake notes. Scholars debate whether this was a scribe's doodle or an intentional symbol. Either way, it survived. You watch the lizard scale the leg of a marble table back in Pliny's villa, newly acquired. He lets it wander over maps and scrolls. One scroll is titled "On the Various Uses of Ants." Another simply reads, "Why Ducks Sleep the Way They Do." The lizard leaves claw prints across both. Outside, Rome murmurs with politics and plague rumors. Inside, Pliny sharpens his stylus and hums a tune no one's ever recorded. The lizard curls up beside a wax tablet and closes its eyes. It has no idea it's about to become part of the footnoted background of Roman intellectual history. Or maybe it does. Maybe it always did. The air is thick with steam, and your skin is already damp as you tiptoe through the echoing corridors of a Roman bathhouse. Torchlight flickers against marble walls streaked with condensation. Echoes of splashes and laughter bounce off domes and pillars. Somewhere ahead, a chorus of senators debates something heatedly, possibly grain taxes, possibly whose tunic is shrinking in the caldarium. You're not here for politics. You're following the lizard. It slinks low to the ground, tail trailing behind, like a whisper of punctuation. Through the tepidarium and into the caldarium, it moves with casual entitlement, like it has lifetime membership and knows which corner collects the best heat. Pliny, you notice, is already half submerged in the steaming pool. Scrolls left at home for once, but not alone. Perched nearby on a sun-warmed ledge is the lizard spread flat like a living leaf, eyes half-lidded in bliss. This is its favorite part of the day, and it's earned it. You sit on the edge and let the warmth creep up your legs. The lizard barely notices you. It's too busy absorbing everything. Not facts, not news, just radiant heat and the scent of eucalyptus oil someone spilled by accident 3 hours ago. Mainstream historical sources confirm Pliny the Elder believed bathing wasn't just hygienic, it was philosophical, a time to think, observe, catalog. But fringe texts suggest he also used the lizard as a temperature gauge. One scribbled note reads, "If lizard leaves ledge, water too hot, trust the beast," which, in fairness, sounds reasonable. You glance at the other bathers. Some give the lizard a side eye, most ignore it. Except for one older man with a silver beard and too much oil on his forehead. He whispers to another, "That's Pliny's demon. You know," speaks to him at night. Then he laughs too hard, nearly slips, and leaves behind an impressive puddle of ego. Historians still argue whether the lizard's bathhouse visits were permitted or tolerated. One senator's diary refers to it as the small green menace that once chewed through his sandal strap. Another philosopher, probably jealous, wrote an entire rant about Roman society going soft when reptiles attend spa days. But the lizard isn't here for society. It's here for the stone warmed to perfection by hours of furnace heat and political hot air. You touch the marble where it rests. It's smooth and toasty, like the back of a well-sunned book, the lizard sighs. Or maybe that's just steam escaping a nearby pipe. You close your eyes for a moment. Around you, Rome hums softly. Somewhere in the frigidarium, someone screams clearly their first time plunging into cold water. The lizard doesn't flinch. It knows the rhythms of this place, the rise and fall of voices, the timing of heated debates, and the exact moment a bath attendant will accidentally spill olive oil on the steps again. And in this steam-wrapped sanctuary, ideas are born. Not always good ones, but ideas nonetheless. Pliny once claimed inspiration struck best when pores were open and distractions were minimal. That may explain why several sections of natural history were drafted mentally in these very baths, while his lizard slowly crisped on a slab of marble nearby, soaking in both heat and context. You shift slightly. The stone beneath you is whisper warm. Your limbs are heavy. The torches sputter. The lizard's tail twitches. Its content. It's ancient. It's possibly smarter than 3/4 of the Senate, and it's not going anywhere unless the water gets too cold. Then all bets are off. You're back in the villa now. Late afternoon slanting through the high windows, the air tastes of ink and vinegar, classic Roman study fuel. Somewhere beneath a waxy sunbeam, the lizard sprawls beside Pliny's writing table, tail draped with the drama of an aging actor. Its snout rests just beside an inkwell, a careless placement. Not at all. You watch it twitch. Then you hear it, the soft plop of a tail meeting ink. Pliny doesn't look up. He's deep into a paragraph about volcanic minerals or perhaps the mating sounds of cicadas. Hard to tell from this angle, but when he finally lifts his eyes and sees the black smear trailing across a half-finished scroll, he pauses and sighs. This is not the first time the lizard has disrupted Roman science. Mainstream scholars acknowledge that Pliny often wrote at frantic speed, rarely editing, always moving forward. Fringe enthusiasts claim the lizard's tail interfered with at least 6 scrolls. One anonymous biographer even insists that a key passage on the warning signs of Vesuvius was accidentally altered because the lizard stepped in a pool of ink and walked across a word that originally meant rumble but was misread centuries later as sneeze. Historians still argue whether this resulted in a tragic mistranslation or an underwhelming metaphor. The mountain sneezed does have a poetic ring to it, though you kneel beside the table. The ink trail is wobbly, like a lazy snake or a drunk line of musical notes. The lizard lifts its head, unimpressed. It has no regrets. It never does. Pliny reaches calmly for a clean scroll and begins copying the ruined one, not annoyed, not angry, just accepting. The price of genius is always at least one semi-domesticated reptile in your workspace. Around you, the room buzzes with the quiet intensity of obsessive thought. Books stacked 4 high lean like tired soldiers, Half-eaten figs ferment in a clay dish. A cat outside the window narrows its eyes at the lizard, which flicks its tail in passive-aggressive reply. It's strange to think how many pages of Pliny's natural history might contain silent influence from this creature. Maybe it wasn't the content, it was the rhythm. The way Pliny's thoughts ebbed and flowed in sync with the flick-flick of a scaly tail. How he wrote around the lizard's movements. How he paused when it blinked. How he reworded a passage because it stepped on a particular adjective. You inch closer to the scroll he's rewriting. It's about stones that fall from the sky, what we'd now call meteorites. Pliny is explaining how some cultures treat them as sacred, others as omens. He writes that animals often sense them before they fall. Earthquakes, eclipses, lightning, lizards freezing mid-motion in anticipation of sky-born rocks. You look at the lizard, it's very still, just watching. Pliny continues. He uses phrases like the reptilian stillness before divine interruption and the cosmic silence of the scale-bearers. You get the unsettling sense that he's not entirely joking. The line between observation and mythology was always blurry in Rome, and Pliny danced across it daily with ink-stained toes. Outside, the sky turns that pale gold hue that makes even oil stains look cinematic. The wind carries the scent of old parchment and something vaguely fishy, probably the neighbor's laundry line. Inside, the lizard climbs back onto the desk. Pliny lets it. He doesn't even flinch when it taps its foot in wet ink again. He simply turns the scroll 90 degrees and keeps writing. Adaptation, after all, is the mark of wisdom. You sit cross-legged now, eyes half closed, the world slowing around you. The scratching of the stylus is like rainfall. The lizard curls beside a small bronze statue of Minerva, unbothered by its goddess gaze, and somewhere in that ink-streaked mess of Roman ambition, scholarly eccentricity, and cold-blooded lounging, you begin to suspect a truth no historian dares write plainly, that every great work of human knowledge is partly written by accident, and maybe also by lizard. The candlelight flickers, low and amber, as you slip into the triclinium, the Roman dining room, where the couches are arranged in a horseshoe around low tables glistening with honeyed figs, spiced lentils, roasted dormice, and exactly one very bored lizard. It sits at the edge of a silver dish meant for olives, eyes unfocused, tail curled into the base of a drinking cup like it's trying to disappear. You step quietly onto the mosaic floor. The tiles are sticky with grape must and aristocratic enthusiasm. The dinner party is mid-lecture. Pliny is describing, in far too much detail, the digestive patterns of a Gallic beetle. His guests shift awkwardly, stealing glances toward the exits. One tries to cough politely but ends up choking on a date pit. Still, the lizard does not move. You creep closer. It's clearly been through this before. In between courses, Pliny gestures vaguely toward the lizard and announces, "This creature once consumed 29 olive flies in a single afternoon." I counted. A few nobles murmur approval. One woman stares at her wine. Another guest raises an eyebrow and says, "And did it rate the flavor?" The table chuckles. The lizard does not. Mainstream sources suggest Roman banquets were long affairs, heavy on food, wine, and social games. But Pliny's gatherings, less about games, more about facts. Dull facts. Beautifully dull. The kind of facts that could sedate a cavalry. That's where the lizard thrived. It had one talent, one performance trick: eating pests, olive flies, bread weevils, and once famously a single rogue cricket that had wandered in during a symposium about the moon's jealousy of the sun. The lizard became, in a way, the night's most reliable entertainment, not because it tried, because it didn't care. Fringe scholars have even argued the lizard represented a stoic ideal, emotionless, constant, focused only on simple needs. Others say it was a subtle jab at the guests. Pliny's way of suggesting his lizard was more useful than they were. Historians still debate whether the lizard was ever formally part of the household staff. One poet claimed it was listed in a will. Another suggested it was given a salary in dead flies. There's no proof, just rumors, and those tend to multiply faster than beetles. As the evening drags on, the lizard makes its move. Slow, calculated. It crosses the table and flicks a fly straight from a honey-soaked pear. Gasps echo around the triclinium. One guest drops his cup. Someone claps. The lizard pauses dramatically, then resumes its journey with all the flair of a stage magician on strike. You sit near the corner of the couch. The cushions are stuffed with straw and surprisingly loud when you shift. You can feel the warmth of the wine-soaked room, hear the crackling of oil lamps, smell the citrus peels crushed under sandal. Pliny launches into a side story about fish that explode in moonlight, completely false, but told with such confidence that even the lizard glances up. It yawns, or at least stretches its jaw slightly. This is as expressive as it gets. By the time dessert arrives, poppy seed honey cakes shaped like acorns, the lizard is already curled up, tail tucked beneath its chin, half asleep on a serving tray. You watch as Pliny, mid-sentence, gently moves the tray out of reach of a sleepy senator who almost dips his fig into the lizard's forehead. Crisis averted. Later that night, the lizard will be carried back to the study in a folded linen napkin, not because it's delicate, but because it refuses to walk after wine-soaked poetry readings, a boundary even reptiles must draw. And as you drift backward, eyes closing, you understand something that every Roman guest at that table likely sensed, deep in their sandals. This wasn't Pliny's pet. It was his editor, his co-host, his scaly fact-checker, and somehow the star of the show. It's past midnight now, and you've followed the lizard to the edge of a high windowsill. Below, the Gulf of Naples glimmers under a slice of moon so thin it looks like it could snap. You press your fingers against the cool stone ledge, and beside you, the lizard stares out still. Silent, small, the breeze carries salt and the faint scent of sea kelp. Distant laughter from the taverns below fades into the hush of lapping water and oil lamps sputtering out. You realize the lizard comes here often, always at this hour, always to this spot. It's not caged, not trained. It just knows where to go. Pliny is in the room behind you, asleep in a reclining chair with a wax tablet still resting against his chest. His fingers twitch occasionally, perhaps writing even in his dreams. But the lizard remains awake, watching the ships drift across the bay like paper thoughts. Mainstream historians often mention Pliny's insomnia. He believed sleep was a waste of study time, often sleeping in short bursts or not at all. Some nights, he'd rise to dictate observations on everything from the shape of clouds to why frogs seem to panic before rain. But this night, he sleeps, and the lizard stands guard. You glance at the creature. Its scales are like dull emeralds in the moonlight. Its eyes reflect nothing and yet seem to hold entire chapters. It doesn't blink. It's too busy watching. Fringe theorists have suggested that Pliny may have believed the lizard could sense changes in the earth before humans could. That, perhaps, its nightly watch was not just a habit but a kind of duty. In a marginalia scribbled centuries later, one monk claimed the lizard once shivered violently the night before. A minor tremor. An event noted nowhere else, but preserved in faith by candlelight and speculation. Historians still argue whether this reflects Roman superstition or an early form of animal-based seismic observation, or, more likely, a coincidence tied neatly in hindsight. But the lizard doesn't care for theories. It watches. That's enough. You lean in beside it. From here, you can see lanterns on fishing boats bobbing on the dark. A soft clang of anchor chains echoes upward. Somewhere, gulls complain in their sleep. The lizard remains motionless. You'd almost think it was a statue until its tail twitches slightly, like a comma in a very long, very quiet sentence. Behind you, Pliny snores, just once. A brief, earthy snort. The lizard doesn't move. Sometimes, in letters Pliny sent to his friends, he wrote of dreams involving waves pulling back too far, of clouds shaped like gods frowning, of animals climbing to high places before storms. In one, he describes a vision of his villa being swallowed by smoke, and a single reptile crawling across the roof tiles as if to escape history itself. You wonder if he dreamed it while the lizard was watching the sea. The wind picks up just enough to ruffle a scroll left on the sill. You pin it down gently. It's a draft about tides, a rough sketch of lunar pull and maritime rhythms. The lizard glances at it once and turns away. It prefers the real ocean. There's something comforting about this nightly ritual, this silent surveillance, this scaly sentinel. While philosophers argued, and emperors schemed, and lovers whispered in vine-covered courtyards, the lizard simply sat here, watching, waiting, remembering. Perhaps in ways only lizards can. The stars turn above, slowly, reluctantly. You rest your head against the stone and feel your breath match the rhythm of the waves. The lizard does not move. It doesn't need to. It's already seen tomorrow, morning again. And the sun is already too proud for its own good. You blink in the bright light pouring through a colonnade as the villa wakes slowly. Roosters crying, sandals slapping, someone in the kitchen inventing a new way to ruin lentils. But your eyes aren't on the chaos. You're focused on the whispers coming from the forum. They're not about taxes, not even about the emperor's latest marble obsession. They're about the lizard. You follow a pair of gossiping philosophers, both wearing togas slightly too tight for comfort, as they cross the square near the temple of Castor and Pollux. One leans in and mutters, "It blinked at me yesterday. Right after I asked whether virtue is innate, the other nods gravely. It once turned its back when I quoted Seneca. I've never recovered. It seems absurd. But there it is. The lizard has entered the philosophical chat. Back at the villa, Pliny is oblivious, or pretending to be. He's arranging scrolls, muttering to himself about volcanic soil acidity, while the lizard lounges under a vine-covered wall, nibbling absent-mindedly on what may or may not be part of a sandal. Mainstream scholars agree Roman society was ripe for omens. Birds, entrails, lightning, bad hair days, they all meant something. Fringe believers insisted that animals could carry divine wisdom, especially those that didn't do what they were told. Owls, ravens, and, increasingly, one particular lizard. The augurs refused to rule on it. That was part of the problem. One priest simply said, "We don't read lizards." Another joked, "Unless it lays eggs on a Senate scroll. We're not interested." Still, the rumors spread. Some claimed the lizard twitched just before a major rainstorm. Others swore it never blinked during debates on ethics. One poor fellow insisted he failed a civic exam because the lizard looked disappointed in him. Historians still argue whether this was mass delusion, a case of intellectual projection, or a low-grade cultural prank that got wildly out of hand. There's even a surviving bit of graffiti scratched into a wall in Ostia. The lizard knows. No one knows what it refers to. Everyone agrees it feels unsettling. You return to the villa to find Pliny mid-scroll again, scribbling about fish migration patterns when he casually mentions, "My companion lizard has not faced the east in days. I suspect a turn in the wind." Is it sarcasm, insight, or just sleep deprivation? Hard to say. You crouch by the lizard, who is busy ignoring everyone. It crawls lazily across the atrium tiles, tail dragging with aristocratic indifference. A slave girl tries to shoo it from the path, only for Pliny to stop her. "He's checking the light," he says simply. You watch it settle in a corner, eyes half shut. A philosopher knocks at the gate, holding a scroll titled "On the Probable Morality of Reptiles." Pliny doesn't let him in. It's one thing for a lizard to be your friend. It's another for it to become a movement. By midday, two poets and a retired soldier gather near the villa gates. Hoping to glimpse the creature, one leaves an offering of fennel. The lizard steps over it and poops near a statue of Minerva. They call it a sign. You walk away. You're not sure if you believe the hype. But then again, last night you did catch the lizard staring at the moon for 20 straight minutes without blinking. That has to mean something. You're in the study again, perched quietly by the edge of a scroll-laden table, when you notice something new, or rather, something ridiculous. Pliny is hunched over a fresh parchment, eyes gleaming, tongue poking slightly from the corner of his mouth in deep concentration. The title scrawled at the top reads, "A Catalogue of Mediterranean Lizards, with particular regard to one." Oh no. You peek over his shoulder. It's exactly what it sounds like. He's attempting a census of every known lizard from Hispania to Cyprus, with brief notations on color, scale texture, behavior, diet, and your eyes, paws, tail personality. Pliny, ever the completest, has apparently decided that tails, like senators, have distinct temperaments. His pet's tail is described as firm but whimsical, reluctant to commit to straight lines, yet noble in curvature. You suppress a laugh, but the lizard doesn't. It merely flicks said noble tail and licks the condensation from the side of a wine cup. Of course it does. Mainstream historians have noted Pliny's obsession with categorization. He wanted to know everything about everything. Rocks, herbs, stars, even the blush patterns on flamingos. But fringe commentators delight most in these bizarre, hyper-specific side notes, like his assertion that certain lizards change color when insulted, or that one species near Corsica smells faintly of pessimism. Historians still argue whether this entire section of natural history was ever meant to be serious. Some think it was a kind of in-joke, a dry wink to other scholars. Others believe Pliny had entered what we'd now call his deep reptile phase, driven by too many late nights and one too many wine-diluted fact spirals. But you watch him now quill-tapping, brow furrowed as he tries to remember whether his pet once refused to eat during a thunderstorm. And if that counts as emotional behavior, he underlines it twice anyway. Scientific integrity. The lizard, meanwhile, climbs into a clay bowl and spins once before curling up, tail curled like a philosophical question mark. Pliny notes that, too. As the census continues, the descriptions become increasingly poetic. Lizard of Numidia, green as an unfulfilled promise. Lizard of Crete, moves like regret on polished stone. Lizard of my villa, observes men as if they are clumsy gods. You lean back, letting the candlelight soften. The room smells like goat parchment and roasted pine resin. Outside, a servant argues with a laundry boy about missing tunics. None of it matters here. Not inside this scroll bubble. The census grows. Pliny adds a footnote describing his lizard's tail color as the shade of Republican discontent. You blink. That's bold. He follows it with a small sketch, just a rough curve, a pointed end, and the faintest suggestion of smugness. You begin to suspect the lizard knows it's being written about. It stretches dramatically, yawns, and flips onto its other side, as if presenting its better profile. Pliny nods approvingly. More tail data, he whispers. Later, a young scribe enters with fresh ink. He pauses when he sees the parchment. "You're writing about lizards again?" he asks. Pliny responds without looking up. "Still, you stay until sunset." The room glowing amber and sepia, the scroll unfurling like a lizard's lazy path across warm stone. You don't know if this census will survive time. Maybe it'll be edited out. Maybe no one will believe any of it. But in this quiet moment, you know one thing for sure. That little creature has more footnotes than most philosophers. You're standing at the steps of the Capitoline Hill, trying not to sweat through your tunic as the city of Rome pulses around you. Vendors yelling about garum jars, a boy chasing a dog with a stolen scroll, and somewhere behind you, an emperor. More specifically, Emperor Vespasian, flanked by guards, dressed in the kind of toga that looks aggressively laundered, and oddly enough staring at Pliny's shoulder, because perched there, gripping the edge of his mentor's toga like a mildly disapproving brooch, is the lizard. You watch this awkward triangle unfold. Vespasian, conqueror of Judea and reluctant autocrat, squints at the creature with that famously sarcastic glint in his eye. "What is that?" he asks flatly. Pliny doesn't miss a beat. A study partner, there's a long pause. The emperor raises one skeptical eyebrow. The guards exchange looks. You resist the urge to whistle. Mainstream historians confirm that Pliny served under Vespasian during various military and administrative duties. They were friendly, not equals, but close enough to share long walks and short letters. And while there's no official record of a lizard-shaped interruption, several early biographers mention an incident involving a reptilian interloper during a palace conversation on the nature of omens. Fringe accounts go further. One suggests Vespasian once tried to touch the lizard and was promptly flicked by its tail. Another claims the emperor remarked, "This beast judges me more than the Senate." No one knows if it's true, but it feels true, and that's almost worse. Historians still argue whether this story was satire, metaphor, or genuine event. Roman satire often used animals to mock the elite. Then again, Pliny wasn't exactly subtle. He once compared a fellow scholar to a limping squirrel. The lizard may have simply been another tool in his unspoken arsenal of judgment. Back in the villa later that day, Pliny seems unfazed. He's sketching again, this time an elaborate chart connecting types of lizards to military ranks. His own is naturally listed under Consul of Heat Absorption. You spot the drawing, a crudely detailed lizard standing atop a stylized sun, its eyes suspiciously shaped like Vespasian's. You laugh. The lizard flicks its tail. That evening, a senator visits, curious about the beast who stared down an emperor. Pliny shrugs. He stares down everyone. He just doesn't care about titles. The senator nods as if this is incredibly profound. Outside, rumors are multiplying faster than locusts. Children claim the lizard was once a god, demoted for excessive eye-rolling. A street performer begins selling lizard-shaped amulets. One forum poet declares, "Behold, the creature who knows no fear except, perhaps, cucumbers." And through all of it, the lizard simply lounges. On scrolls, on pillows, once, accidentally, on a pile of figs meant for a visiting dignitary. The dignitary ate around it. You kneel beside it. The room is quiet, filled only with the soft rustle of parchment. Pliny hums something tuneless. The air is heavy with ink and that odd, earthy smell. Lizards always carry a mix of stone, bark, and secret opinions. And somewhere in the distance, the emperor wonders whether he was just side-eyed by a footnote. The lizard is twitching again. You spot it curled beside Pliny's bed, front claws neatly tucked beneath its body, tail drawn like a loose question mark across a faded linen sheet. It's early morning, too early. The sky outside is dark with that thin, gray pre-dawn light that looks like wet paper. The birds haven't started, but Pliny's dreaming. He mutters something, a half-formed word, vesu, and then nothing. You move closer. Stepping softly across the mosaic tiles, the lizard's eyes are open now. Its pupils wide. Its body is still, but its tail flicks once, twice. Not aimless, measured. Mainstream scholars agree that Pliny was obsessed with volcanoes. His writings on the subject are some of the earliest and eeriest recordings of seismic behavior. He cataloged the way animals behaved before eruptions, the change in wind, the odd smell, like cooked copper. But what you see now isn't a scholarly note, it's instinct, maybe prophecy. The lizard lifts its head and stares directly out the open window toward the dark outline of Mount Vesuvius. Pliny jolts awake. Fringe historians often cite this moment recorded only in a half-burned private letter as the beginning of the bad dream. In it, Pliny described walking across a dry field, hearing thunder beneath the soil, and watching his lizard skitter across an endless rooftop as ash fell like snow. Historians still argue whether this letter was metaphor or memory, but you watch him now sitting upright, scribbling half-madly on a wax tablet, and there's no metaphor in his expression, only worry. The lizard crawls to the window. You follow. The morning light is clearer now, sharpening the lines of the distant volcano. It looks calm, sleepy, even, but the lizard doesn't blink. Maybe, Pliny says softly behind you, maybe we are the ones who sleep too deeply. He's not talking to you. He's talking to the creature, or to himself, or maybe to Rome. Later that day, he writes a long passage in natural history about volcanic clouds that rise like pine trees, a phrase he invents. No one else has described them that way. It becomes famous, but that part of the book also includes a strange aside about reptiles that become restless before geological events. He claims his own companion once twitched all night before the ground groaned. No citation, just observation. The rest of the villa carries on, as if nothing's wrong. Slaves sweep ash off the courtyard tiles from a fire the night before. Someone brings in stale bread. A letter arrives from Pliny the Younger complaining about political gossip in the Senate. But you can feel it. Quiet unease. And the lizard doesn't move from that window. You sit beside it. There's a stillness to the moment that isn't peace. It is more like suspense. Even the flies avoid the ledge. A soft wind carries the scent of sulfur, faint but real. Pliny doesn't eat much that day. He dictates letters faster than usual, with less sarcasm. By sunset, he's pacing. The lizard climbs atop a scroll and flattens itself. You try to read Pliny's eyes, but they're far away. Maybe already at the foot of the volcano. Maybe already in ash. It starts with the smell of burnt linen. You're in the atrium, late afternoon turning copper. When a shriek slices through the calm, a laundry girl bursts in. hair half charred, shouting about a brazier that tipped, a gust of wind, and the lizard. The lizard. It ran through the flames. You run. So does everyone else. The laundry corner is chaos. Baskets overturned, soap smashed, singed tunics curling like old leaves. A clay brazier lies on its side, embers coughing smoke into the air. And just beyond the scorch marks barely visible under a steaming sheet, you see the lizard. Still breathing. Pliny arrives, robe half on, eyes wider than you've ever seen them. He kneels without ceremony, brushing soot from the creature's tail with a trembling thumb. The lizard opens one eye. It's fine. Singed, smoky, dramatic, but fine. Pliny exhales like he is releasing a ghost. He survived, he says. Then, with deep seriousness, he dislikes wool blends. Mainstream historians don't often mention this incident. It survives only in a crumbling side note, buried in a 9th century monastic copy of Natural History, a scribbled line added in different ink. Beasts of the house will flee fire with surprising grace. Even those who sleep through senators. Fringe lore, however, turns it into something mythic. One account claims the lizard doused the flames with its tail. Another insists the fire was divine punishment for washing Pliny's scroll drapes in common soap. A third poet, clearly inspired by wine, wrote an entire elegy about the scorched saint of the toga heap. Historians still argue whether any of these are remotely true. You're less concerned with the rumors and more focused on the lizard, now lounging in a basin of cool water, looking far too pleased with itself. A slave gently sprinkles rose petals over its back. Pliny doesn't stop her. That night, the villa is unusually quiet. Pliny cancels his usual dictation. Instead, he writes a private entry. Ash can teach. If one listens, the beast, silent as he is, left the blaze unafraid. I, too, must be unafraid. You sit nearby, watching the lizard dry off beside a flickering oil lamp. Its tail curls toward the flame but doesn't touch. It seems to understand fire now, or at least respect it. Pliny eventually drifts into sleep on a bench. Scroll still in hand, you remain awake. The lizard does too. You hear distant thunder, though no clouds hover above, just the steady wind from the bay and the faint scent of something old rising from the ground. A crack appears in one of the courtyard tiles. The lizard notices. So do you. But neither of you say anything. Not yet. It's travel day. You're helping Pliny pack scrolls into leather cases, watching him mutter about tides, lecture dates, and whether there'll be figs in Cumae. Across the room, the lizard has already climbed into its preferred satchel, a worn linen bag lined with olive oil rags and smelling faintly of pine tar and ink. He doesn't bother to coax it anymore. The creature knows when it's time to go. Outside, a chariot waits. Pliny's assistants rush around like panicked beetles, one counting scrolls, another tying sandal straps, a third attempting to balance a portable sundial on a stack of codices. But the lizard lounges, regal, unbothered, possibly mocking everyone. This isn't their first trip. Pliny, ever the eccentric orator, travels with enough materials to rebuild a small library. He's headed to speak at a symposium about moonlight, frogs, and possibly why toads resent thunder. The lizard has attended these before, tucked discreetly into a fold of fabric, or perched quietly on the rim of his podium like a sleepy punctuation mark. Mainstream historical references confirm that Pliny gave informal lectures across Campania, often at villas, bathhouses, or impromptu gatherings on marble terraces where guests sipped on diluted wine and pretended not to fall asleep. Letters from attendees mention excellent observations on animal magnetism and a reptile that did not blink even once during a reading on the lifespan of barnacles. Fringe accounts are more colorful. One describes a guest fainting after the lizard crawled across her scroll. Another suggests the creature once disrupted a reading by sneezing, though no one agrees if lizards even can sneeze. Historians still argue whether the lizard's presence was intentional performance or eccentric coincidence. Some say Pliny brought it as a stabilizing ritual, proof that he was never truly alone before a crowd. Others insist it was his most trusted critic, silent, judgmental, and impossible to impress. You ride beside them now, the chariot bumping along the Via Domitiana, wheels rattling over ancient stone. Pliny's talking to himself again, muttering about lunar shadows and whether cicadas understand shame. The lizard peeks out from the satchel, eyes narrowing at the landscape of fields and villas flying past. Once, as you pass a roadside shrine, a farmer spots the creature and gasps, murmuring a quick prayer to Mercury. You're not sure if it's fear, reverence, or just superstition. Maybe all three. The lizard blinks slowly, then retreats into the bag, as if to say, I'm not in the mood. At the villa that night, guests gather by torchlight for Pliny's talk. You sit in the back, knees pulled up, candle wax dripping onto your sandals. The lizard is placed on a polished marble pedestal beside the speaker's table, given its own fig slice and a damp cloth to sit on. Pliny begins. You half listen as he discusses frogs that appear only during eclipses, owls who imitate human cries, and one alleged case of a dolphin attending a trial. He's skeptical, but every so often, he gestures toward the lizard and says things like, "My companion does not fear the moon." Observe, he turns away from bronze but not from thunder. He has never trusted mirrors. No one dares interrupt. You glance at the audience. They're spellbound, not necessarily by the facts, but by the ritual of it all. A man, a scroll, a lizard. Some things don't need to be explained to be true. Afterward, a boy approaches to pet the creature. Pliny blocks his hand gently. He's not a pet, he says. He's a witness. To what? He doesn't explain, but you understand, because the lizard saw it all. Every midnight thought, every accidental ink spill, every moment of wonder, and every whisper of the coming ash. It begins with the birds. They vanish. You're awake too early again, expecting the usual sounds. The coo of doves on terracotta roofs, the distant screech of gulls over the bay. But the air is too still, thick, like syrup. The villa feels muffled. Somewhere in the distance, a dog is barking in that long, uneven pattern animals use when they feel something you don't. The lizard is already at the window, tail curled, body low, eyes fixed on the volcano across the bay. Mount Vesuvius doesn't look angry. Not yet. It looks serene. Even shy its peak veiled in a strange, threadbare cloud that almost seems stuck there. Pliny is scribbling furiously, already halfway through a fresh scroll titled, "Clouds that Resemble Pine Trees." Unusual formations. This is the morning of August 24th, 79 AD. Mainstream history knows this date too well, but you sitting here in the quiet with a lizard that hasn't moved in an hour are about to live it. You follow Pliny through the villa as reports trickle in. Ash falling near Misenum, faint tremors rattling amphora, smoke seen from Pompeii. Servants murmur nervously. One claims the sea is retreating too far from the shore. Pliny orders a boat, and of course, he brings the lizard. The satchel, now familiar, rests over his shoulder. The creature crawls in without fuss, tail flicking once as if to say, "We've waited long enough." Fringe biographers paint this scene with drama. Pliny standing on a hilltop, robes whipping in volcanic wind, lizard perched defiantly on his arm. Others say the creature was hidden in his tunic pocket the whole time. A few, in whispered tones, claim the lizard tried to flee before they even reached the harbor. Historians still argue whether the lizard ever made it to the boat, but in this telling you follow both of them. Pliny boards a small vessel at Stabiae, determined not just to flee, but to observe. Fortune, he says to the crew, favors the brave and the curious. Then, softer, to the lizard. But you already knew that. You hold tight as the boat rows across the darkening bay, ash beginning to fall like powdered death. It's warm, clings to your arms. Smells like sulfur and burnt figs. The sky shifts to a sickly gray-green, and thunder rumbles, but from beneath the sea, the lizard remains calm. You disembark near the villas of Pompeii, where everything is already coated in a layer of dust that makes footsteps vanish as soon as they're made. Slaves scream. Carts overturn. The sun disappears entirely. Pliny presses forward, notebook clutched in one hand, lizard peeking from the other. He's dictating as he walks, voice ragged but resolute. It is not night, and yet the sky is darker than ink. There is no flame, yet all is burning. You glance at the creature. It's no longer watching the mountain. It's watching him. A gust of hot wind knocks you sideways. Tiles fall from rooftops. A horse bolts past, dragging an empty harness. The ground groans beneath your feet. Someone yells about the gods. Someone else calls it the end of days. But Pliny keeps walking. Into the ash, into the wind, into the moment that will define both him and perhaps the lizard. Later, records will claim he collapsed from toxic gases. Others say his heart gave out. A few believe he paused to help a friend, refusing to run. You stay with him until the very last. You watch the scroll fall from his hand, and just before the darkness overtakes everything, you see the lizard leap, not away, but forward. You wake up hundreds of years later. The air is colder now, still dusty, still dry, but different, quieter. The villa is long gone. The bay has reshaped itself. The mountain looms as ever, calm again, arrogant in its silence. And you are no longer beside Pliny. You're deep beneath stone floors of a medieval monastery, somewhere in southern Italy, watching a monk with cracked fingernails and bad eyesight unroll a scroll so old it threatens to dissolve in his hands. He pauses, adjusts his candle. You inch closer. The scroll contains a half-legible chapter on reptilian temperament in volcanic proximity. It's absurd. It's marvelous. It's footnoted in 3 languages and references a creature only known as the Observing One. The monk looks puzzled, then amused, then reverent. He pulls something from a pouch wrapped in wool. At first, you think it's a dried fig. It has the right size, the right leathery texture, the right vague suggestion of having once been alive. But when he brushes away the dust, you see the curled tail, the frozen claws, the faint outline of scales clinging to a fossilized belly. He bows his head. Fringe legends tell of this relic, a creature entombed near the ruins of Stabiae, discovered centuries later during renovations to a chapel's foundation. Some monks believed it was a symbol God's messenger, a divine whisperer who survived fire without speaking a word. Others just called it the Roman witness. Mainstream historians are less sure. Some say it's not a lizard at all, just a twisted piece of wood shaped by pressure and time. One scholar insists it's a fig hardened by ash and superstition. Another argues the scales show signs of preservation only seen in animals buried under rapid pyroclastic flow. Historians still argue whether it ever lived, ever watched, ever followed Pliny to the very edge, but the drawing in the monk's marginalia etched beside the passage is too precise to ignore. It's not just a lizard. It's the lizard. Tail slightly bent at the tip, one claw missing. That familiar, unimpressed expression somehow captured in ink with 3 crude lines. You follow the trail through dusty records. One manuscript mentions that a visiting bishop requested to have the scaly relic placed under the altar. Another claims the relic vanished during a fire in 1323, only to reappear in a side chapel of Palermo in 1491. Stuffed inside a hollow statue of Saint Anthony, you find a fresco cracked, faded, ignored. It depicts a scroll, a mountain, a man in robes, and beside him, a small green figure, mid-step, tail flicked toward the rising smoke. Nobody painted lizards in frescoes, not unless they meant something. Back in the modern world, tucked in a forgotten drawer at the Museo Archeologico in Naples, there's a box. No label. Inside, a fragment of a scroll edge, a shard of volcanic glass, and a curled piece of something organic, unidentified, unstudied, just resting, waiting. You step back into the dust, and somehow you feel it watching you. Still, back in the dream room, you've returned, somehow, to that familiar villa. The study unchanged, untouched by ash or time. The scrolls are stacked again, the ink still wet. Outside, cicadas hum as if nothing ever burned. And there, basking in the last patch of warm afternoon light, lies the lizard. It's older now, slower. The tail curls just once, then rests. You kneel beside it, hands on the cool tile. Pliny is nowhere to be seen, but his presence lingers etched into every creased parchment, every scratch on the writing table, every ember-smudged corner of the room, where thought once sparked and lizard feet left tiny prints in spilled ink. The creature opens its eyes. You don't need to speak. It knows you've come to watch. It shifts gently, one claw resting beside a scroll half-finished. The title reads, "On the Quiet Things That Endure." A final note is scribbled at the bottom. He saw more than I ever did. I simply had the quill. Mainstream history doesn't remember that line. But maybe it was never written for history. You sit quietly as the light dims. The lizard, warm from the stone, doesn't move. Its breath slows. Its belly rises and falls like tidewater. It has outlived cities, ash, memory, scholars who laughed, prophets who guessed, scrolls that crumbled in their own importance. Fringe legends claim the lizard never died. Some say it walked away from Pompeii before the first roof fell. Others believe it was granted immortality and eternal observer, wandering from library to library, resting in shadows and turning its head only for those who ask the right kind of questions. Historians still argue whether any of it is true, but you've seen it now, felt its weight in the world, knew the hush it carried into every room, the calm disruption it brought to logic, to certainty, to silence. You rise. The room is dim now, washed in twilight. The shadows curl softly under tables. The smell of dried rosemary and sun-warmed parchment drifts around you. Somewhere outside, wind stirs cypress trees. You give the lizard one last glance. Its eyes are closed. Its tail curls just slightly at the tip. And then you walk away, not because it's over, but because it was never about endings, just quiet things that endure. And now, the villa fades, the lizard, the scrolls, the soft thunder of distant mountains. They all dissolve like ash into evening air. You're lying still now, blankets tucked close, breath warm against your pillow. The voices of Rome grow quieter behind you, retreating through colonnades of memory and myth. Pliny's ink has dried. His questions, his observations, his curiosity, they're yours to carry now, not loudly, not urgently. Just like the lizard did, quietly, without needing applause, without ever blinking too hard at the absurdity of the world. You picture the creature again, coiled in a sunbeam, tail twitching once before sleep. It doesn't need an audience. It never did. The world turns, the ash settles, the volcano waits, and somewhere, a soft-skinned thing with scales and silence climbs onto a scroll and rests its head against forgotten knowledge. Let that be enough for tonight. Let your breath slow like the lizard's. Let the weight of history fall away from your shoulders like a discarded tunic. No gods to appease, no empires to build, just the warm stone beneath you, and the sense that something very old, very quiet, is keeping watch while you sleep. Soften your jaw, unclench your thoughts, let go of the mountain, let go of the ink. And if your dreams carry you toward ash or scrolls or small green shadows, let them. The lizard will be there, still,